Well, welcome to the Big Brown Gadfly, where we give a hard time to people who need to be given a hard time, just like Socrates' horse. And I am here with my beloved guest, Denise McAllister, who has not been around on the hustings much because she is self-healing. Is that fair to say? Or
self-healing, yes.
Staff development. She's enjoying her time, but I have managed to drag her out into the public square for this episode because I just feel like there's no one who could talk to this issue better than her, and this is an issue that I really feel we need to discuss. Just to let you know where I'm coming from, I have gotten off of Twitter and Facebook. There was so much drama with the banning and the locking of the accounts and all of the sabotage. So I just got off of Facebook. I got off of Twitter. I never had Instagram. My friend from El Salvador told me that I should try TikTok. I had never heard of this app, so I got on TikTok. She said, "Oh, you'll blow up. You'll get tons of followers." I don't have almost any followers. It did not blow up. I'm not really well suited to that medium. But what's interesting about TikTok, Denise, did you know this, that on TikTok, the algorithm constantly adjusts every second that you interact with videos. So you get more and more of the videos in your feed that are the kinds of things that you interact with. Did you know this?
No, but I'm not surprised.
Yeah, and so it's a great way to discover who you are. And I thought that I would end up getting tons of stuff about Christianity and about academic freedom. I thought there would be a lot of stuff on the LGBT issue coming in on my feed, but it's not. Apparently, the things that I naturally and instinctively interact with are about dating and marriage in the heterosexual context. So my feed just bombards me with all of this content from women and men, and they are talking about heterosexual dating and marriage, and it is so toxic. And I had no idea how toxic and dysfunctional everything was. So, Denise, I know that you've been in hiding a little bit, so you haven't been in interacting with the culture. Why don't I just open it up to you? I'm curious what you think, what questions you would have for me, given that I've done this deep dive into dating on TikTok.
Is TikTok where Reddit meets, the rad femmes?
It is. You have, absolutely. But it's all in 30-second and 45-second tidbits floating out there in the ether. So you have accounts like this one woman she has an account called Herspective, kind of a cute little play on words. It's this Asian American feminist. And I mean, her stuff comes up in my feed and it's just toxic. The example she gave of the only male positive role model that she wanted to give was Prince Harry, because she said, look, he was willing to give up his family and his country for her. Other than that, everything is about how men are awful. You are a queen. You should demand the best. Don't settle for anything less than exactly what you want. And this is the theme that I'm getting everywhere. It's rad femmes meets Playboy bunnies meets Christian chivalry, because these women expect absolutely everything. And isn't this different from the feminism that you thought of in the 70s and 80s? I mean, that was about women being independent, not depending on men. This new kind of feminism is about men owe me everything and they need to provide things to me. And at any given moment, I can punish them severely if I don't get exactly what I want. That seems to be what I'm getting.
Well, Herspective, that word says everything. That explains everything right there. I mean, it really truly does. It captures the spirit of the age. His I can't even say it. Herspective.
Yes.
His perspective. However you want to say it. When you make everything filtered through your own psychology, your own personal feelings, your own pathologies, your own order of creation, your own self-creation, your own idea of the relationships, when all is filtered through that subjective perspective, then everything goes awry. Everything becomes chaotic. Everything becomes narcissistic. And even if you drag Christianity into it, you can make Christianity a narcissistic tool for anyone. You only have to look at history to see that. You can bend it to the will of Sauron, to make it whatever you want it to be in order to manipulate others. So this is the problem. We're way beyond feminism. It's not about feminism. The first wave feminists were about some rights, political rights before the law. Straight on the heels of that were the second wavers, who were all about sexual liberty, sexual identity, sexual freedom. With that wave was ushered in this kind of subjective identity this expressive individualism. I am whatever I want and feel and imagine. And when that becomes the basis of identity, then you have to demand that other people recognize it. Men have to bow to your own self-identity. And
it really is a demand for mastery, isn't it? It's a demand for domination.
Well, it's a demand for recognition of a self and of an identity, of a truth that is purely subjective. But you demand that when it's tied to identity, which is tied to rights, if I am an identity, and if I determine what that identity is, and if my identity is based on my sexuality, however I see it, and that is my identity. And we in America, being good little, individualistic liberty lovers, put identity as the foundation. We want to respect identity, and rights are tied to that. Then whatever I imagine must be recognized as valid and legitimate. And if you don't recognize it, you're somehow dehumanizing me. You're discounting me. You're erasing me. And so this is the spirit of the age, and it doesn't matter whether it's feminism or anything else. It's whatever the individual wants and imagines, and however they tie it to whatever. So, the individual woman who's like, I want a man who has these Christian elements of loving me unconditionally and sacrificially. But by the way, he needs to make at least $100,000 a year. He kind of has to be hot because, that's important. And he has to let me, do whatever I want to do and work outside the home and not to take care of my babies that I produce. He has to do whatever my will bends, whatever my will is, and he has to bend to it. This is the spirit that we're engaging in.
Right. No, you're
everywhere.
Yeah, this is what is so disturbing to me. Is I agree with you that it is not a question of just feminism, because there is a whole host of women who identify as conservative, who identify as Christian, who identify as anti-feminist, and yet their demands are just as repulsive. A lot of them do insist that they're only going to date someone who is very attractive. Like they expect men to have washboard abs, to have really worked out. They expect a high income, and they expect that man is going to make all that money, give it to them, and also even when they come home from a long day at work, be emotionally available. That's the term that I'm always hearing, that they need to be emotionally available and emotionally supportive. Which means also,
act like, that's code for act like a woman.
Yes, exactly. And so here's the thing. The confusion of all of these different messages that we have gotten. On the one hand, we were told that we shouldn't slut shame, but I think that's an issue from 30 years ago. I don't think that anybody slut shames anymore. Everyone is affirming and applauding women who behave in adventurous ways in the sexual sphere. But the problem is that, unless they want to become lesbians, which I don't think that these women by and large want to become, because then there's no man in the relationship to throw all your
penis in the relationship, and they want that.
Yes, and there's no man that you can blame everything on, right? Unless you then your sexual adventures are going to be with men, and they ultimately don't like in any way, shape, or form the idea of a man who is sexually active. They find that disgusting. So I don't know where is this heading? You know, there was one set of TikToks that went around a lot where women were holding up tape measures, and they said, if your penis is this long, you need to never raise your voice at me. If your penis is this long, you can ask me things, and you don't have to say please. And if your penis is this long, you don't have to ask me, because I'll make sure that your food is ready and waiting on the table for you.
And by the way, your penis can be minuscule if your bank account is in the billions. I mean, let's not forget the male side of the hot, crazy matrix. You know, yes. Women will sacrifice the washboard abs for, you know, a bank account. You know, where's this heading? It's heading to disruption of relationships and chaos.
Well, a lot of them seem to want everything. So a lot of them, I think what they want is they want to have this period where they can sexually play around with these younger men who have really great bodies. And then eventually, that's the whole hypergamy that you hear about all the time. And then when they find that rich guy, then they want to be able to move into the marriage and live there. But many of them say openly that at the moment that they feel like that marriage is no longer worth their while, they want to divorce and get out of them and get all of the money through alimony, take the kids, and then go become a cougar and then have an affair with a young man when they're in their 50s. And there's a lot of fascination, for instance, with young Hispanic men as like the target for a lot of that lusting and stuff like that. So it is so dysfunctional on so many levels. And what's so scary is the fact that the women who are engaging on this path, and we will talk about the men in a second, but the fact that there are women who are engaging on that path who don't see any other route as anything that they could accept, because any other route would mean compromising on themselves and giving up, settling. That's what the term that they always use. So they feel that this is the best thing to do. This is the only thing that they can do is to live like this. And Denise, I mean, from your assessment of it, I mean, what are the chances that some of these women are going to find this? I don't think that they're attractive enough to land a man like that. I don't think they can pull this off.
Well, they won't. And when your standard for relationships and for happiness and self-fulfillment is generated from your own feelings, and that's the standard of what men must meet, you're going to be disappointed. You're going to be unsatisfied. You're going to be lonely in the end, because the only person that can meet your own reflection of self is yourself. And you're just going to end up looking in the mirror wanting yourself, and that's not very satisfying in the end. This is just the disruption of relationships, like I said. And so, when you're not willing to look at what is my objective role here as a woman in a relationship, what are the standards and morals of behavior that God has designed for me to be in a marriage relationship? What does self-sacrifice mean? What is giving up my feelings? Again, if self-expression and self-identity and the psychology of the woman or the man is the full identity of the self, you're going to be ending up alone, because you can't you can't meet anyone else on another level, because it's all about you in the end. So this is the trajectory. It's going to end in loneliness until you realize that my life is not just in my purpose and my identity as a woman. Mm-hmm. It's not just about my feelings. It's not just about what I want and being able to express myself however I want and demanding that other people bow to that. It's about, sometimes marriage is about not expressing your feelings, about conforming your feelings to the moral standards and sacrificing and giving up what you want for other people. But see, that's labeled as inauthentic, which leads to I'm settling. This whole idea of I'm settling means, I'm not able to express my authentic self all the time. And therefore I'm settling because I'm somehow not being me in the relationship. And being me is whatever I feel and whatever I demand and whatever I want. And you better reciprocate that and recognize that, you're not recognizing my authentic self and I need to move along. It's narcissism at its root. It's the essence of everything about identity today. It's the essence of cultural Marxism and intersectionality and all those terms that we throw out. But that's where we are. It's not about feminism. It's about self-expression, self-creation, and this subjective idea about relationships and, our own sexuality.
I am just surprised at how many of these young women are so fixated on money, and how many of them seem to want money because they picture themselves not having to work. I mean, isn't this basically what feminism was about? Was you got the power to have your own income, or to join in that part of it. And I'm not saying that I personally am in a marriage where I am the breadwinner, my wife stays at home, and I make all kinds of sacrifices for that to be done, to happen. But a lot of these women, they don't picture that and incorporate the fact that that might mean that it's poverty when your husband loses his job, or when he gets cancer and you have to move from a large house to a small studio apartment, or move in with a relative to get through those hard times. I've been through that with my wife. I've been through hard times, and I loved experiencing poverty because I was experiencing it with my wife. But I don't think that these girls who are running around saying that they're going to marry a man because they want to be a stay-at-home wife, I don't feel like they have that in mind. Do you know what I mean, Denise? I think that they picture they're going to be comfortable. And I think that a lot of them, when their husband loses their job, they're going to find any kind of emotional excuse to file for divorce. That's the sense that I'm getting from them, honestly.
Well, the standard for the good life now, for living a quality life, an authentic life, is economic stability and economic flourishing. Thank you, cultural Marxism and all the rest of it that's come in, that our identity is very much tied. And there's actually roots even deeper than that go beyond Marxism, but that's another topic. But, that our identity, our happiness is rooted to our economic welfare. I mean, we almost cannot have conversations today without bringing economics into it. The economics is part of our identity. And, the whole idea of being marginalized now is based on economic measures. If I'm not living the kind of life that I want to live, if I don't have the kind of money I want to live the kind of life I'm living, someone else is doing that to me or not providing it for me. And therefore, they're not recognizing my right to have all these things. It's an entitled mindset about how your life should be and the quality of your life and what the good life really is. I mean, Bobby, back in the days of Plato, Socrates, and all the rest of them,
right?
the good life was about living an honorable life.
Yeah.
Back in the days of Aquinas and Anselm and all the rest of them, the good life was living a moral life before God. Mm-hmm. The good life now is being psychologically expressive and having economic stability and having all our needs met. It's a materialistic, closed universe kind of mindset about who we are. So if that's what you are going in, you're looking at your spouse or your partner in that frame. There has to be economic reciprocation. There has to be, economic satisfaction for me to live the good life. And if I'm not, I need to bail on this relationship in order to find the good life.
Well, and then there's a whole jurisprudence. There's a whole juridical system that guarantees that if a woman just presses the button and says, I want divorce, everything moves in her favor. And so there's almost,
she maintains the good life.
Right. There's almost there's almost no incentive. Now, I saw a lot of complaints online, and I used to be one of those people, Denise, once upon a time, where when I would be involved in these discussions, my gut instinct would always be to criticize the guy. So if a guy would complain about something, I would tell him to suck up and deal, especially if it dealt with his sexual desires. I would always blame men. But I've really had to rethink that. There are men do really terrible things, but the terrible things that men do, we have dealt with as a society, and we have created an entire legal and prison system to address, so I don't even think that they're the main urgent issue right now. But there were a lot of complaints from men who said, I married someone and I work all day long and she does not want to sleep with me. I suspect that she's having an affair or she's doing something else to relieve her own sexual desires, and she won't let me watch porn. Okay, now I know you don't like porn, and I don't
No,
like porn.
it's not about not liking it. It's evil.
It's evil. It's evil. But I'm looking at this, and you have an issue like this with porn, and I'm saying to myself, there was one woman, she's a Christian woman who tries to present the other side, and she posted something saying, if you're not having sex with your husband, don't make the issue about him using porn. You have to find a way for you and your husband to have a sex life. If you're constantly saying no to him, and Paul even says that you're not supposed to do that in 1 Corinthians 7. And she was attacked by the women in the comments because all of the women were like, you should never have sex if you don't want to. And I'm like, why did you get married if you don't want to?
Oh my gosh. I've heard this a billion times. I mean, this is something I write about in my book, what we want to say to women but can't. And I've written about this several times and made these comments that one of my things is, when you come home, when your husband comes home from work and he wants to have sex with you, have sex with him even if you don't feel like it.
Oh my gosh, were you attacked by people?
It's sacrilege. It's heresy. It's going against the doctrines of self. How dare I? So yeah, I've heard this many, many years now because I've written about this, and the relationship that you have of oneness and giving and taking of the sexual relationship and giving even when you don't feel like it, and how men emote differently. Sometimes they just need to have sex and that is their connection. Don't make men into women and have them do all this emotive stuff before they earn some sex. That's ridiculous, and again, I am not talking about this and neither are you in an abusive situation. I'm assuming you two people love each other and we're talking about normal interactions here. So yeah, no, I've heard this a lot, and it still comes down to selfishness, narcissism. It's about how I express myself, and you need to recognize that as the truth. And if you don't, then you're delegitimizing me in some way, not honoring me as a woman. Instead of the woman going, I am married to this man. I'm one with him. My body is his and his is mine, which is, again, sacrilege in the, the cult of self that we have now. So the whole concept of sacrificial love, getting in bed with your husband when you don't feel like it because you want to give to him because he needs that. And that's how he connects, is through the physical.
Right.
It seems to be it is a foreign concept to women who are all about their feelings define what the relationship is and who they are. It's sad. It really is sad. They don't experience the joy of giving, and they don't experience the joy of the oneness and they don't have really understanding of what the unity of the sexual relationship is. It's just all about self-gratification, self-expression instead of the other.
Well, and a lot of it also is that people have told them that it's totally acceptable to marry a man because he has greater economic potential, even if you don't love him. And then you get into the marriage and the man, look, let's be honest. We get married with the expectation that we're going to have sexual relations with the person that has married us. So women constantly want sympathy when they say, look, I got into this marriage with this man because I thought he was a good provider, etc., but I don't feel attracted to him. It's like, you shouldn't have married him if that's how you feel. And if that is how you feel, then it doesn't make any sense that then you're offended that he's, going to be finding other outlets for his lust, whether that's masturbating in the shower or watching dirty movies. I mean, it's crazy. But that woman got severely attacked for that, and it just seems as though it's such a dysfunction, the whole thing. And I can tell you this. I just want to explain where I'm coming from. I'm in a very happy marriage. I've only been married to one woman in my entire life. This is the only woman I've ever been intimate with, to be honest with you. I dated for about a year after I recovered from cancer. At the age of 27, there was a year that I was dating, and I was dating lots of these young girls, and I'll explain why this is relevant in a moment. But I was 27, I was dating girls who were like 21, 20, and I found that the conversation was really empty. I reached a point where I wasn't even sexually interested, when I would have these conversations with these women. And then I met my wife, and she's exactly my age, and we fell in love. I can't explain what it was, but we fell in love. Every time I watch a movie and there's a love scene, I always reflect upon that year, that beautiful autumn and spring when I was with my wife and falling in love. I will never forget it. It will always live on in my memory. And we loved each other. And so we married for love, and everything that we went through together. So I didn't mind poverty because I just have such fond memories of working together with her and, having to buy discount furniture and, and all of the things that we did to make it work. And, we had each other. And I feel like my relationship, I feel like a dinosaur, Denise. I feel like I'm totally not relevant to anybody. I try to give advice and everyone's like, who the hell are you? Like, get the heck out of here,
Well, because you were working from a common understanding with your wife about, what love is and what commitment is and what sacrifice is. And those are out the window now. Now it's all about the self, and even like you were talking about when you get married, part of that marriage relationship is sex and withholding it, and in that intimacy that's born out of love, like you described, is integral to that relationship. And when a woman denies a man that sexual relationship for whatever reason, or uses it as a tool to get what she wants, or uses it as punishment when he doesn't do something or does something, which is horrifying to me. Don't be surprised, when you find your husband cheating on you or looking at porn or doing whatever. That does not make his actions correct. And to the man, I would say, I don't care if your wife isn't having sex with you. There's no justification for you having an affair or watching porn and all of that. So,
right.
But on the side of the woman, don't be surprised if that happens, because people are sinful with needs and you're driving them away. So, both, you're culpable for his, estrangement from you and his needs not being met. He's of course culpable for whatever choices he makes within that deprivation.
Right.
And, but don't be surprised by that, because what's meant to be is that unity and that oneness and that sexual oneness and intimacy that is in marriage. And when it's denied for, these selfish reasons or vindictive reasons, or I'm just not feeling like it. Because again, it always comes back to feelings, doesn't it? What do I feel like doing? Well, sometimes, honey, it's not about what you feel. Just do what you're supposed to do. Sometimes to the husband, I know you feel like watching the porn because you're not getting sex, but just do what you're supposed to do and don't watch it. Don't use other people's tools through the screen in order to gratify yourself.
Right.
You're a rational human being. Exercise self-control over your animal appetites, as strong as they are. But the point is to come together. You understand what the sexual relationship is. That it's not just about you and your feelings. It's about coming together and giving and loving and becoming one with another person that honors God, who created you to be in that relationship. Instead of making it all about economic stuff and feelings and all of this kind of stuff that's so prevalent today.
It's so hard. Now, to be honest with you, when I looked on that woman's, I forgot her name, and I'm sorry that I forgot it. I should have brought that with me, but she gets thousands of comments every time she posts. And on that one that she posted about porn and women denying sex to their husbands, what was interesting to me was there were many times that men went in there and said, look, I'm not justifying that the man cheats or who watches porn, but I'm just trying to say that if that is the root cause, that women can help change the problem by meeting their husband halfway. And the women in the comments, by and large, would not accept that middle position because it involved some criticism of women. And they wanted nothing but to just immediately go to criticizing what the man did. And they couldn't look at what the women were doing.
Well, I think also at the root of this is a hyper-individuality, a hyper-individualism.
Right.
And that, I'm only responsible for myself. It's all about myself. And, I'm not responsible for you in any way, shape, or form. Individualism is great when it comes to politics and personal responsibility before the law and all of that. But the fact is that individuals live in community, and you are responsible for your interactions with other people. You play a part, and there are cause and effects within intimate relationships and relationships with other people that you need to own. when you're in a marriage and you withhold sex from your spouse, and this is also not just a problem with men and women. Some men withhold sex from their wives. I've talked to women who are also severely frustrated because their husbands, for whatever reason.
Yes, that's true. That's
so
true.
Both. If you're withholding sex for whatever reason, that's a selfish reason, non-medical aside here. You are having your choices, your personal individual choice is having an impact that causes a response and behavior on the part of the other person. Now, are they still responsible personally for their choices that they make out of that? Yes. It's like this, Bobby, I don't know if, I've talked to, I cannot tell you how many people I've talked to who've gotten divorced and say, I got divorced, I cheated. I was married, I cheated because I wasn't having, my spouse wasn't giving me sex, wasn't having sex with me.
Yes.
So, and they're like, it's their fault, and of course the spouse is like, no, it's not my fault that you cheated. This is one of these complex situations where, is it the spouse who was not having sex with you, was it their fault that you cheated? Okay, the act of you cheating, you're culpable for and you're responsible for. You're going to be answerable before God for your adultery, no matter what caused you to do it. But there are circumstances around that fed into that you being in this position to want to have sex with someone outside of your marriage. And and your spouse needs to own that. They don't own your adultery. They're not, guilty of your adultery. You're guilty for that, but they are guilty for setting up the circumstances where you're so deprived that you went to seek adultery.
Well, here's the thing that I saw on those TikTok things, and I do want to bring up what I'm getting from the men on TikTok, because that's another issue that's very interesting. But when that woman would post things on TikTok, you would see thousands of comments from men all saying the exact same thing. My wife doesn't want to have sex with me. Now, I always jumped in there and said, hey, there are women who have that issue too. And I know that there's a lot of men who, you're tired, it's 1 o'clock in the morning and your wife is feeling frisky, and I believe you should get up and make love to her if you know what I mean? Just to keep your to keep your marriage happy, because trust me, you're not always it's like, you still got it. Your wife is touching you.
For her.
Yeah. Right. But you would have thousands of those men posting those comments, and the women would just not, and these are men who are saying, look, I'm not cheating, but this is the situation that I'm in. And even absent the cheating, the women are still attacking the men for the situation that they're in. And that was what led me to just think, okay, this is really deeply dysfunctional, because they're not even willing, even if he's not going to cheat, they're still going to insist that he needs to just endure this with no relief whatsoever.
Because again, it's about them. It's like it's about the women determining the rules of the relationship, because everything's about their feelings and what they want, right?
Yeah.
And that can go for the men as well, depending on the situation. But yeah, it's whenever you enter into a relationship with the idea that my feelings are paramount, my feelings define who I am. Mm-hmm. And you need to recognize that and honor that. So if I don't want to have sex, if that's what I feel like right now, you need to honor that and recognize that. And if you don't, you're somehow violating myself. Mm-hmm. No, that's not how it works. Your feelings are not your identity. Your feelings are not your moral responsibility to your spouse. Mm-hmm. It's about, what God has called you to do. It's about your purpose, your teleology. And not your feelings. So it's this is the problem, is we live in an age when it's all about the feelings and all about the pathologies that come with our psychology, and whatever those feelings are, whatever that psychology is. It's like Philip Reeve said, the psychological man is the man, the identity of our age. When we have that as the central understanding of what our identity is, any challenge of that, any question of that is to dehumanize, and you have to recognize that. And if you don't, you're somehow hating me. You're somehow you're not loving me. and then that the whole foundation is wrong, Bobby. It's not just about behavior. It's not just about porn, adultery, marriage contracts. It's about who are you and what is your purpose and what is your purpose in that marriage union.
All right. Now, listen, those are such fantastic insights. And I want to thank you so much. I am going to talk now about the men and what they're saying. And maybe you can help me out with this, because I got into the most vicious fights with the males, and the specific males that I got into vicious fights were with. These were what I would call the pick-me boys, the guys who get on TikTok and they want to appeal to tons of female viewers so they can get tons of followers. So they're getting on there. They're kind of feminist allies, but they're male, and their discourse is always the same. I'm going to get tough on my fellow men and tell them that they need to suck it up and deal. And they really engage in all of the same blaming that the feminists are doing towards men, but they add into it this discourse that I'm telling other men that they're not manly, that they're soft, that they're weak because of this. And to give you one example, there was one man, and it was very disturbing. We went back and forth. He made videos in response to me. I made videos in response to him. And this guy, he's a Christian preacher, and he was saying, like, look, if you work all day long and you come home, you're not off of work when you get home. You need to completely be on duty for your wife all the way there until you go to sleep at night. And he said as an example that he knew this guy who worked 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, and had 4 kids, 2 of whom were special needs. His wife was a stay-at-home mom, but he would come home from work and he would let his wife take a break, and he would do all the chores until he went to sleep every single night of the week. And I wrote back to him and I said, this man is going to die of a heart attack. You're neglecting basic mental health. And this is what I'm getting from a lot of the male TikTokers in their desire to act like, oh, I'm the knight in shining armor, and I'm going to put all these other men in their place. Where does this even come from? Why would you betray your brothers like that? And do they have any understanding? My biggest concern is the total lack of emphasis on mental health. I think when women are involved, we talk constantly about depression, anxiety, etc. Nobody's talking about hypertension. No one's talking about stress or about the effect of all of that on these men. You're working 12-hour days, and then you come home and you don't even get an hour to just watch the TV that you want to watch and be alone and not be bothered by people. It's really scary to me. This is what I wrote on Gab about it, and I got some good comments from people on Gab. I said, after a month on TikTok, I have learned a lot about why male-female relations are so messed up. All these man-bashing accounts have zero critical awareness of themselves. They respond to anybody who questions their total imbalance and naivete by attacking questioners and critics as knuckle-dragging cavemen, or by telling them they need to man up because their desire for a balanced understanding of men and women implies that they are effeminate somehow. These male-bashing critics have no intention of abandoning the basic structure of chivalry, minus the obligations people had to men. Men are still supposed to be self-sacrificing, patient, tender, forgiving, and hardworking, but now they are also entitled to zero respect from people, and there's a complete disregard for basic male mental health. Everyone just thinks that if you keep nagging and scolding men, somehow men will never crack. And then if they do crack, under all the stress and pressure, it's the man's fault for being weak. I find this so disturbing on so many levels. Maybe you can't answer this because you're not a guy, but I don't understand why men are participating in this. Don't they think that at some point they might, I don't know, get an injury and not be able to work and then be treated this way by their wives, like a product to be thrown away, and then all of a sudden all of the same discourse is going to be turned on them? I just don't get it.
I think the issue is so complex. And I think that's one of the problems here. There are times, because we do live in a very emotional age, when we're defined by our feelings and our wants, and that is on the part of men as well as women. Fact. So men, you do have a whole generation of men, and I see them, of one, being a part of that. It's all about my feels too. We live in this therapeutic age, which I think is gross. But again, The Triumph of the Therapeutic is another book. Is that another Philip Reef book? Or Charles Taylor, no, it's Reef. The Triumph of the Therapeutic, that we all have to think about our psychologies first. So there's that aspect of it that I think that maybe there are men who are looking at that aspect of it, just like I look at women acting that way, and I put women in their place and tell them to buck up. You have some men looking at men in that space saying, you guys need to buck up. Christ said, man, love your wife like Christ loved the church, and he freaking died on a cross for them. Buck up. So I think in that context, they may be speaking in that frame. But that frame must also be looked at in the larger frame of that these are men in a time when they're battling feminism, when everything's being dumped on them as being toxic masculinity, when they're being abused and being used, and they marry these women and they're raked over the coals, and their savings are taken and divorced because they didn't live up to whatever standards the woman wanted. So you're talking to men living in a time and dealing with this rabid feminists who are also emotionally defined. And they're feeling exhausted and exasperated and used. And so when they hear, hey, buck up and be a man, they get angry because they're like, wait a minute, when I am being a man, I'm being used and dumped on by all these crazy feminists who are abusing me. And you're telling me I'm not doing enough. So I think it's why these massive social media conversations are sometimes not good, because a lot of it comes down to depending on the situation and the man in the situation that you're in. So if you're dealing with a man who's really not pulling his weight, who's really given over to despair and acting by his own emotional feelings, and I don't want to do this and I don't want to do that and I don't want to work hard. And I'm sorry, but there are men out there like that. There really are. I'd rather watch my porn than do my duty.
Right.
Yeah, those are the ones you need to like pin up against the wall with a manly fist and say, hey, son, go down into the mines and do your work. Stop whining. Did you ever hear our great grandfathers act this way? What is wrong with you? Do your job. Be a man. There are times to say that to people. Just like there are times for me to say to women, knock your crap off, have your babies, stop whining. Stop saying that, you need to have everything. You need to have the men with millions and do all this stuff. Stop it. Be a woman, be a mom, be a wife. There are times to say that to both. But you're in this mix. You're in this mix of reactionary. You cannot, even when you're talking that way, you have to know who you're talking to, because if you're talking to a man, like I said, who's been abused by women, who's been in a situation that's hopeless, that kind of talk to them is going to be despairing. And you're going to get what maybe you're feeling of where, this is really awful.
Well, to me, it's just
like if I'm talking to a woman who's like been in an abusive relationship and I say those things to her, she's going to look at me with terror in her eyes. What? You're telling me to go and be subservient to my husband, be submissive to my husband. These are complex conversations here, and we need to know who we're talking to and why we're talking about it and explain these in details. And I don't think that can always be accomplished on social media.
Well, it definitely can't be done in 60-second videos. It's true. I think the ones that really irritate me are the ones when it's very clear that they're performing for the female audience, and when it's clear
the white knighters are always gross, aren't they?
Yeah, they're disgusting. One of my favorite accounts on TikTok is Cameron Geller, who he created this fake persona called Timothy Bitch Boy, professional pick me, man, who's always trying to like win over the women by acting like he's a feminist ally. But so I am finding a lot of these young Christian. And I'll be honest, they're handsome and they look like they're athletic and cross-trained. They're like 32 years old, posting these things online, chastising men for not wanting to accept the terms of marriage and dating as it exists today. And I guess
valid within a certain context,
right? Yeah. Well, but as a 50-year-old man, what I've said to some of them is, you're young, you haven't been through things like losing your job after 20 years in a profession, and then, not being able to find another one. I mean, you're still young, you're attractive, people are going to treat you a different way. A lot of the men who are expressing a lot of this alarm, these are people of my generation who worked really hard. They're in an economy that is absolutely emasculating in every way imaginable. They lose their job. Like when I lost my job in December of 2019, I work in Texas, which is an at-will work state. In 3 weeks, I had no health insurance and no job, and I'm the breadwinner for a family of 4. It's not like if I were 30, I could probably, there's a lot of spring in my step. I could probably go out and do lots of jobs and find a job really quickly. I can't do that at the same rate. And a lot of the men who are in that situation, that is when she files for divorce. That's when she tries to get out of the relationship, when you're down. And I don't think that a lot of the men who run these male Bible study things are always fully aware of what goes into the men who are in that situation, if that makes sense.
Well, yeah, I think these conversations, whether it's being said by men to men or women like me to women, is that you need to be able to, and it's a difficult talent, and it's a rare talent, and it's one that's not fully able to be exercised on social media, is being able to both give objective foundational principles about being a man, about being a woman, about marriage, while still being empathetic and aware of individual circumstances that are difficult. So it's that being able to take yes, you need to sacrifice for your family. You need to quote unquote, man up and take on the burdens. That is your calling. That's your privilege, to be provider and conquer the world for your family and all of that. But understanding that as you tell someone that and you encourage them to think in that context, that they are facing difficulties in life, that they're facing their own struggles in life, that they're facing, divorce, and they've been used and they've been abused by this culture of rabid women. And, and be sensitive to that and be aware of that. It's like talking to the man who's not getting sex, saying to him, zip your pants, you don't need to have an affair, and you better knock off the porn. And him going, yeah, but I'm not getting any sex, don't you feel any? And I can say to him, I have the greatest amount of empathy for you as a sexual creature myself, of not being able to have sex. And it is not right that your wife is not fulfilling that role. And I have the greatest amount of sympathy and empathy for you in that context. But within that, and I want to help you through that emotionally, but the standard of behavior, your responsibility before God and before your wife remains the same no matter what your personal circumstances are. You're not to cheat and you're not to watch the porn.
Yeah, so, you have to give... you have to give the tough love. You do.
With empathy and with understanding. And I know the type of men you're talking about who are these, gung-ho. I don't think they're always, appealing to the feminists. I think sometimes they're anti-feminist. They're more the Christian hard-nosed, be a man kind of types. The types that are trying to ooze up to the women are just gross. But the others that are, trying to hold this hard line for the men, I think that, like anything we do in life when it comes to these standards of behavior, is have empathy about individual circumstances.
Well, I mean, let me just be more specific. I guess these are not the guys who are giving hard-nosed things like get up and get a job. You got to provide for your. These are people who are like, your wife suffers so much when she gives birth, and you can't even fathom that. And when you come home after 12 hours of working, you have a way of understanding all the stress that your wife has been through at home. And so, if she is placing all these demands on you and nagging you, you just take it, just suck it up and deal, and, do everything you can to please her. And there's no criticism whatsoever of what people are doing to this man. You know what I'm saying? I think the number one thing is nagging. There's a real lack of understanding about what it's like to be nagged day in and day out. I mean, that assaults a person's dignity. And that's something that is a very heterosexual dynamic. You know what I mean? I'm not going to say that women are as guilty of domestic violence or sexual assault as men are, right? I mean, obviously there are some things that men are more guilty of. But when it comes to nagging, that's just a constant that I see everywhere, where you have these relationships where, you know, men try their hardest and nothing they do can ever please their wife. And it's just, they get home and all they hear is discontent. And I know that there are guys, like I used to go hang out at bars, and you'd meet the guys there who don't want to go home because they know that the minute they walk through the door, their wife is going to attack them. You know what I mean? And so I think if that's the situation that men are in, I think a lot of these, like, you know, feminist allies online, it just seems to me like they're adding to the problem, because it just comes across as more nagging, more, you know what I mean?
Well, yeah, it just needs to be more balanced, because I don't know.
Yeah.
One thing I've learned when you're talking to anyone about a relationship with a spouse, whether it's in marriage or outside of marriage, there's always two tales to the same story.
Yes.
So it's like, okay, you know, is she really being that awful? Maybe she is. I don't know. So you have to be both sensitive. Again, you just come back to, you know, be sensitive to the individual experience, you know, what they're going through, and knowing that it's a really hard time for men right now. And again, I wrote a whole book about that, being sympathetic to men. Now, I understand the difficulties that men are going through, but even as you say that, there's a place to also maybe not think of it as nagging, but be encouraging to these men to still be, because ultimately the standard and reason for what they do and how they behave is not because of the woman, it's because of their relationship with God. I don't serve my husband because he deserves it. I do for my husband because it's the right thing for me to do before God. Now, saying that, if my husband's abusive and a jerk and abusing me and being awful, that brings in a different dynamic. That's a different factor that I have to take into consideration. And Paul addressed this kind of thing. You know, that's why there's reciprocity in relationships. That's why there has to be two in the relationship acting. You know, and so whenever you're dealing with anyone in marriage counseling or any kind of advice about relationships, which is what's going on in all these forums, really, is relationship advice thrown out there into the ether, is that it's complex. You know, I don't know what your particular situation is. I don't know what your particular perception of your relationship is, but I can give you general principles to live by, while yet still being sympathetic to the times in which we live and the hardships that people face. And I think probably what you're facing is you're seeing just, you know, the hard nose, either they're doing it to white knight the females, or they're just being kind of legalistic in their Christianity, whatever it is. You know, it doesn't have balance. And I think we need to bring balance to these conversations.
Well, I think it's a major issue for why men have checked out of church. I think that this is what men are getting. This is what men have been getting for decades in the male Bible studies, is the same lecture and the same, and it's almost like,
it's all your fault.
Yeah, you go to the male Bible studies and you feel like the men there are agents of the women. You know, they're like they're spying on you or something like that, or running interference for the wives. So I think that a lot of them feel that. Now, I do want to say,
I totally agree with you. I've seen it. I've heard it. Yeah, it's like the dumping ground of the men. Even I don't know if you've experienced this, Bobby. Even like sermons and stuff like that. Yeah, you'll hear jokes about the women. I mean, about the men not doing what they need to do at home. Or you never hear jokes about women being worthless.
Yes, exactly. It's always like, there's all these comedy TikToks where men are so proud to make little comedy skits about here's what my wife would do to me if I stood up to her. Like, and then there's some joke about her murdering him, and I'm like, that's actually kind of not funny, and it's actually kind of corny and annoying after so many times that you do the same joke. You know.
One thing I really hate, when Mama's not happy, nobody's happy.
Oh,
I want to punch people every time I hear it. I do. Yeah, Mama's not happy, nobody's happy, and I want to say, well, maybe Mama just needs to be unhappy for a while.
Yeah. Well, maybe next time we can talk about the toxic male side of it. These men who are like, I'm never going to get married. I'm just going to go find some 20-year-old, which, you know, I'm like,
which is gross.
Good luck. You know, you find a 20-year-old. I mean, 20-year-old.
I watch my porn all day long. You know,
Yeah, it's gross. All right, well, listen, thank you so much, Denise. We will stay in touch, and I want to thank you so much for coming out of hiding for this. And
I'm not completely in hiding, but sort of in hiding.
was sort of semi. All right, well, thank you. Listen, Denise has been publishing a lot of stuff on American Thinker, so I encourage you to go to americanthinker.com to see some of her recent articles, and I will be back in the saddle next week. Thank you.